Hello everyone and welcome to this video. Now today I'm going to be doing another album review. I'm going to be taking a look at this record today, which is Sunflower by the Beach Boys. So this was actually a request that I had by a user called The Original Being. They asked for more Beach Boys kind of content and kind of like reviews. So I thought that I would give this album a review because it was one what I picked up in maybe the last couple of months and really enjoyed, and I've later discovered it is one of the Beach Boys' most well-loved albums, so I thought that it would be worth talking about today. So I'll just be doing the usual thing in this video, giving a bit of background information about the album, then showing you my vinyl copy of it here, and then looking at each of the album songs in detail. So this was Beach Boys' 16th studio album, released on the 31st of August 1970. I mean, just thinking about that, I mean, that's just staggering, you know, like, I think, like, when was the first album, something like 61 or 62, you know, like, to release, like, yeah, it's like nearly, like, 2 albums a year, kind of, like, average, yeah, like, it was incredibly productive, kind of time for them, like, the 60s, but by this point in their career, like, by the time they got to this album, the Beach Boys were definitely kind of seen as the kind of yesterday men, like, of like rock, who'd been unable to keep up with the kind of evolving musical trends, like, of like the late 60s. Firstly, like, into psychedelia, and then sort of into sort of heavier, sort of more progressive, more politically charged music. The Beach Boys, like, very much like were not flavour of the month by the time this album came out. Now, this album was, I think, their longest record in terms of recording it, like, to date. Like, it took like a year and a half to get this album together, which, yeah, like I said, relatively long, like, by their very productive like sort of like standards, who had like pumped out like 2 albums a year, like, over like the previous like sort of like 10 years. So part of the reason for this delay in kind of getting like this album out there was their change of record label to Reprise Records. So this was as a result of I think there was some unpaid royalties between Capitol and the Beach Boys of totaling around £2 million lawsuit was kind of filed in April of 1969, and then they were also so that kind of dissolved like their contract like with Capitol, but then they were kind of sort of like looking around for a new label, and like as I said, because they weren't exactly flavour of the month, like they really struggled like to find like a new label to sign with, particularly because like their music wasn't selling particularly well by this point, but also because they had built up a bit of a reputation, or rather leader Brian Wilson had built up a bit of a reputation as someone who was quite difficult to work with, quite erratic to manage, and sort of was seen as quite a risky venture for any record label to sign the Beach Boys. But eventually, though, they did find Reprise were willing to take them on. However, this was not exactly smooth sailing, because the album faced further delays, like as a result of like this new label, who were not satisfied with early running orders like off the album. So I think that like they kept sort of adding and sort of finessing the album like for over like a year, like after like signing to like a new label. So this album is quite unique in some ways for the Beach Boys, because it really is a true collaboration between all members, with Brian Wilson largely absent from their last release, 2020. On this album, though, it very much is a team effort. Like, all members contribute songwriting credits and lead vocals throughout the album. However, much like the very best Beach Boys music, like Pet Sounds and Smile album, like this album, I did rely on quite a few session musicians on many of the kind of like rhythm tracks, like the drum and bass parts, were more often than not session players. So in terms of its commercial success, this album didn't really have a whole lot of it. It charted at number 151 in the US and stayed on the charts there for only 4 weeks, becoming their their worst selling album to date. Live shows at the time, like in like America as well, like were particularly difficult as well. A lot of them had to be cancelled because of low audience attendance and sort of poor ticket sales. However, in the UK, it was a slightly different story. Like, I guess ever since Pet Sounds had kind of come out, you know, like I had I guess a bit more appreciation for the Beach Boys, like than like their than their native America. So this album, I think there was a further delay on it. I think it came out in the November, but the response though was a little bit more positive, both critically but also commercially, charting at number 29 on the charts. However, across the board though, like when it was released, the critical reception was largely positive, with Rolling Stone magazine writing that it was the best Beach Boys album in recent memory, stylistically coherent tour de force, while in the UK some music critics even compared it to the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper. And I guess it's one of those things, like, it's quite fascinating, you know, that despite that contemporary, like at the time, critical acclaim for this album, it still just did not sell. However, to this day, you know, it's become a bit of a cult classic, like in like the Beach Boys catalogue, continues to be well acclaimed, and I think is often considered their best post-Pet Sounds album. So what should I show you? I've had a copy of it here. Now this is a reissue of it, I think from the 80s, because original copies were gatefolds, where I think you had all of these pictures were included like on like a lovely kind of gatefold spread. But this is just a cheap reissue. I think it's a nice price label here. You see all their other releases there, so it's nothing to write home about this particular copy of it. But it's a decent pressing. It's recently been reissued, this album, in a kind of box set called Feel Flows, with the following album called Surf's Up, which is another one of my favourites, like off like the Beach Boys. So it was a very productive time, this kind of 69, 70, 71 was some very interesting years like for the Beach Boys, and we'll delve in to the track by track review now. Come on, won't you let me be by your side? The album kicks off with a song called Slip On Through. Now this is a Dennis Wilson penned song, and this is a really nicely put together track. It's kind of starts off quite chill, but then the chorus really picks up, both in terms of the beat but also Wilson's vocal performance as well, which is just feels a lot more muscular and kind of powerful than most Beach Boys vocal performances. It's a really nice song. There's very catchy, infectious chorus, which manages to combine classic Beach Boys sort of sound. Like there's no mistaking who you're listening to here, because it's got a sense of fun about it. But then it has also, like as I said, like got like this great lead vocal like from Dennis on it. So yeah, Slip On Through, really good song. Would get a 9 out of 10. Okay, next one up is called This Whole World. Now this is a Brian Wilson penned song inspired by, and I'm quoting, "My love of the world, how I love people and how people should be free," with Carl Wilson singing the lead vocals on this one here. This is a complex, multi-layered song which really takes a good few listens to really make sense of what's happening like with this track. Like all the best Beach Boys songs, it's quirky and goes on some quite unexpected turns as well. It's also quite ironic that this is actually the shortest track like on the album, like barely passing like 2 minutes in length, but it definitely is one of the most complex on the album and one of the ones which definitely has the most replay value for me. So yeah, This Whole World, really great song, would give that one a 10 out of 10. Okay, next up on the album is Add Some Music to Your Day. So this is a song which was a co-write with Brian Wilson, Mike Love, and a guy called Joe Knott, who I'm not sure if he was a producer, like an engineer, or perhaps just another kind of collaborator. But no, this is a good song, I think. Melodically is gorgeous. Like I can't fault it, kind of like melodically. But lyrically is good. You know, it's celebrating kind of like the wonder of music and how like the world could come together as one if everybody under the sun add some music to their day, and sort of like how like music is always there, like in kind of like everyday mundane life. For me though, the execution of it is a little bit schmaltzy for me, a little bit cheesy, but it is growing on me a little. And I think what really rescues this song and really makes it stand out is just that gorgeous melody, interesting production on it as well. There's some nice harpsichord on it as well. It's just a really nice feeling track, this for me. This was the lead single from the album, issued in February of 1970, but was a big flop. It charted at number 64 in the US. I think originally the album was going to be called Add Some Music, but I think when this single flopped, that idea was quickly abandoned. But no, a really good track there, an 8 out of 10. Okay, Okay, next one up for me is called Got to Know the Woman. Now this is a Dennis Wilson song, this one here, but it's probably for me the weakest one on the album. It's basically a straightforward bluesy rocker about kind of a female lust kind of thing. Basic lyrics on it, uninspired musical backing on it, like as well. You've got these kind of session sort of female vocalists like on it as well, which just really doesn't feel like a Beach Boys song. This side for me, definitely one of the weakest ones on the album. Okay, next up is called Deirdre. Now this is one of two songs by Bruce Johnson on the album. So I think he joined the band in kind of 65, I think, like as a kind of replacement to Brian Wilson when they were kind of touring. But I guess on the albums, the idea was that he wouldn't really be on them and that Brian Wilson would kind of sort of like take the helm. But by this point, with like Brian Wilson's involvement kind of getting lesser and lesser, like in like the Beach Boys, it was up to folk like Bruce Johnson to kind of like sort of like fill that void like a little bit. And his two songs like on the album are both quite schmaltzy kind of ballads for me, very easy listening. This first one, Deirdre, is alright. It's got very basic lyrics on it though, like sort of like very basic rhymes like baby 1 2 3 and you're back with me tomorrow at 10, now I'll wake you up and then kind of is the kind of depth like of like the lyric. Musically it is multi-layered, there's a lot going on with this song here. It feels it's certainly like a well produced song. You got flutes, you got trumpets, you got all sorts on it, but it's just very schmaltzy, very cheesy kind of ballad, which just doesn't really do a whole lot for me. So yeah, Deirdre would get a 6 out of 10.
I'm singing in my heart. I'm singing in my heart.
Okay, side one closes up with It's About Time, which is a real stylistic shift for the album. This one is a frantic rocker. This one co-written with Dennis Wilson and Al Jardine, and this is got a strong opening riff. It's got some great percussion work on it, and a really interesting middle section as well, which goes very trippy and echoey with these great sounds which sound very fresh and kind of undated. Lyrically, it's a kind of autobiographical song, I guess, about the kind of pitfalls of fame, which is the kind of, I guess, it's one of the reasons why I'm maybe not giving it a 10. It just feels a bit too self-referential for me, a bit too about them and kind of thing. You know, it's hard to relate to this song, basically, kind of thing. But it does show definitely that on this song here, you know, that I don't think Brian Wilson like even plays like on this, and it's just testament that they could still achieve some great things like even without like his like involvement. But certainly his involvement's kind of almost like on this song replaced by kind of session musicians who really kind of like sort of like step up to the plate in terms of like the drums, the bass, and like the excellent conga playing like on it as well. All really good stuff. So that one will get a 9 out of 10.
And I've got tears in the morning.
Okay, next up on the album is Tears in the Morning. Now this is the second Bruce Johnson track on the album, and it's another kind of old-time kind of ballad, this one here, but I do think it's slightly stronger than Deirdre. I think it's lyrically very melancholic and melodramatic as well. Talks about things like a cancelled future and like I hope you love the baby that I'm never going to see. Once again, it's a grand production, sort of great kind of orchestration like on it, and a surprise hit as well from the album. Was released in some territories and did particularly well in the Netherlands. I've got noted here, reaching number 6 on the charts there. For me, it is just a good song on the album. It's nothing special. It's just a good song, which would get a 7 out of 10. Okay, next up is called All I Wanna Do, which is probably one of the most acclaimed tracks on the album. So this one is a Brian Wilson and Mike Love co-write, with I think Mike Love dealing with the vocals and also the lyrics. But I think what really stands out with this track is the production, which is just this incredibly kind of dreamlike and kind of very reverberated sounds, very airy kind of vocals. A lot of people credit this song to inventing a genre called chillwave, but even you can even some people say this was the first kind of shoegaze or dream pop kind of song, like, you know, because it's got that kind of very futuristic feel. You know, it doesn't sound like a track from 1970, this one here. Surprisingly though, Brian Wilson doesn't rate this one particularly particularly highly himself. He's called this track boring, but I think it is one of the best tracks on the album, and I think deserves a place on every Beach Boys best of compilation. It's also, I would say, a high watermark of Mike Love in the band as well, with him handling the vocals, and he wrote the lyrics, and I think, yeah, like absolutely like a high watermark for him, like in the Beach Boys.
I talk forever.
Okay, next one up is called Forever. Now this one is a Dennis Wilson and Greg Jacobson track, this one here. So yeah, you can really see like on this album, Dennis Wilson really stepping up to the plate, like in like the songwriting department. This one is a tender ballad, once again, with that kind of classic Beach Boys kind of harmony magic on it. I would just say it's a bit generic, a bit cheesy, this one, and like kind of like the lyrics on it are a little bit weak, and the track is just a bit forgettable, doesn't really stand out for me much. So yeah, we'll give that one a 5 out of 10. Okay, next up on the album is called Our Sweet Love, which is a Brian Wilson, Carl Wilson and Al Jardine penned song. And this one is a reworked from an older track that they left off their 1968 album Friends. It's a dense production, this, again a full orchestration like on like this track here, but in its execution, and I think just the fact that on this, because you've got Brian Wilson behind the melody on this one here, it really has a kind of Pet Sounds sort of feel to it, this one. It feels a bit similar to some of the other tracks like on the album, but I do think that it just stands out a lot better compared to some of the other ballads on here, because you've got Carl doing a great lead vocal like that, and like that Our Sweet Love could last forever line is just great. You can just really feel the passion like in like his vocal performance, and just the melody like is absolutely to die for. So yeah, Our Sweet Love, a really, really good song there. Okay, now the penultimate track on the album is called At My Window. Now this is a Brian Wilson and Al Jardine track. This one is about kind of bird watching kind of nature and that sort of thing. It's quite a oddball track, this, in some ways, because you've got sort of like some kind of vocal sampling like on it as well. I think there's a kind of French bit like in like the middle, some very like intriguing sounds like on it too. Begins a lot more kind of folky like and like acoustic, sort of a bit hippie kind of sort of feel to it. But then you've got lots of overlapping layers on it, just very like sort of like a big kind of white wall of harmonies, like on like that line, like It Came to My Window part. Yeah, really good song, this one here. Maybe a little bit yeah, like it's a great production kind of thing, which I think is like is what really stands out with this track. Okay, now the closing track on the album is called Cool Cool Water. Now this is a song which had been lying around for a couple of years. So they originally attempted it as part of the Smile album, in the form it was called Love to Say Dada. But then when that album was kind of abandoned, they then tried it out for the Wild Honey album, but again didn't quite work out, so it was resurrected, this song, like apparently like at like the insistence of Lenny Waronker, who was a executive at the new label that they had signed to, who had apparently heard the kind of Smile version like of like this track and sort of insisted that they kind of finish it off. It's a multifaceted song, this one here, quite a fascinating song. Begins with kind of pleasant if slightly lightweight vocals on it, but then it gets slowly more disturbing and more unsettled with some kind of interesting kind of Moog synthesizer textures on it. Brian Wilson has described this track as one of his all-time favourites, despite the kind of production on this version largely being handled by Carl Wilson, who had I think like he kind of salvaged like these previous workings like of like the song and kind of made it into kind of like this sort of version we hear today. It is an offbeat song. I think it's one which might need to grow on me a bit more. Right now I'm not sold on it, but I am aware that it is considered a kind of Beach Boys Brian Wilson classic, so maybe do need to give that one a little bit more time, but for the time being giving it a 7 out of 10. Okay, so overall, this album would score 76%. So I must say, I can't say that I adore this album like many other big Beach Boys fans do, because I'm simply still relatively new to kind of the Beach Boys and kind of like, I guess, like appreciating like their whole vast and very dense like discography. But what I can say is that this is a darn good album. There is some really good variation like in terms of styles throughout here. You've got a good mix of kind of rockers with like a lot of Dennis Wilson's contributions, a few kind of cheesy ballads, maybe one too many cheesy ballads, and then a couple of sort of like Brian Wilson work, so kind of oddball genius kind of thing. So I think it kind of manages to cover quite a lot of ground, this album. The big part like of the story with this record though is the kind of stepping up like of the other Beach Boys members to the table in terms of songwriting and working together in a very kind of fluid way to kind of collaborate. Like there's so many different combinations like of like collaboration like on like this album, which like sort of to be able to do that almost without any outside influence. I think like they self-produced this album, produced by the Beach Boys, and also like there's no sort of like unlike Smile and Pet Sounds where it was Brian Wilson with a kind of sort of third-party lyricist. You know, on this track it is just purely the Beach Boys who are kind of responsible like for like the songs. So I think like that is why this is often considered a kind of fan favourite album, and I think it is a really, really, really good record. So I would be interested to know what you think of the album down below in the comments section, and I will see you all next time for the next video. Goodbye.